Hello, Avatar fans, and welcome to the next episode of the Avatar Online podcast. This is going to be episode 231 of our regular shows. We are recording this one on July 24th, 2021. This is the official podcast for the fan site AvatarTheLastAirbender.online.com. I'm going to be your main host, Morgan Airspeed Prime, and joining me on the podcast is Greg2B from the site.
What's up, everyone?
Excellent. So today's show is going to be another news roundup show. There's actually been quite a massive amount of news since the last show, and a lot of it relatively recent. There's a few older bits, but a lot of it has happened basically within the last week. So definitely wanted to get this out of the way ahead of the next podcast, which is going to be the Suki Alone review podcast. So look forward to that one next week, because the book, of course, is out in 3 days from the recording here. So that's the setup that we have at the moment, covering all the news here so that we can focus on Suki Alone for next week. And we'll just jump straight in here with the first bit of news, which I believe we covered the first part of the Mike and Brian podcast interview for Braving the Elements on the last podcast. And immediately after that, the part 2 of that interview came out. Now, there's not a ton to really talk about. It's sort of more of the same. But the sort of interesting thing to talk about here is mainly the Avatar Studios comments that they made at the end. Janet Varney did make sure right at the end, sort of final topic, she has to ask them, what can you say about Avatar Studios? And I'm not going to say that there's anything particularly new here. This just, to me, felt like a bit of a rephrasing of what we already knew from the initial announcement back in February. But they mentioned once again the idea of it being sort of a multi-tiered approach that they feel is very ambitious. It's big, broad, that they're basically able to, with the support that they have, which is way different than they had during Avatar or Korra, they now have the ability to not just do one thing, they can do all of the things if given enough time. They talk about it's like a long plan. They jokingly sort of say that it might last 20 years. We'll see exactly what it turns out to be, but just that they seem excited to delve into the Avatar world a lot more, and them referring to the Avatar universe as big, rich, and largely untapped is probably a good sign that they also view that what we have so far is kind of scattered across the timeline and hasn't really filled every single thing in. Some of the more interesting stuff is towards the end, that they talk about how they want each of the projects to have its own feeling, tone, look, and to be sort of different expressions of the Avatar world, which is kind of interesting. And they talk about other audiences, which I think fits probably what we thought they were going to do. Yes, appeal to the fandom that they already have, but that likely will get stuff that is aimed at probably a younger audience as well, and potentially maybe an older audience is also. So they, in general, it just seems like they're excited about it, and it's just a little bit more insight into their kind of opinion on what's going on here. But Greg, what were your thoughts on Mike and Brian's comments about Avatar Studios on the podcast?
Yeah, I think they did a good job, at least for the last bit of theirs, just, really bringing it home that this is a pretty much really big sort of endeavor that they're shooting for here, and they're no longer just doing it as, sort of like a show here, a show there. They're really thinking of it as a franchise, as sort of building a, the whole sort of structure of, the Avatar verse, or, Avatar Legends, however we want to call it its official name. And just sort of how they're, taking the sort of tiered approach. They mentioned an octopus, and just everything sort of branching down from the top. So, they're really thinking more of it as a whole thing, just sort of how they're going to get it all out to people to view in, the many different formats that you're able to consume media. So no, I think I like that they're just taking that approach, and they mentioned that it is, it's not something that's going to come quick, as we'll mention later on that certain things haven't been really, or anything really, have been announced in the larger scheme of things, and some things have even seemed to have now, taken sort of like a back burner approach just to sort of possibly line up with things. So it definitely seems like this is definitely more of a bigger picture thing where, things are going to have to sort of start coming out eventually, and then things will start keep, sort of rolling and rolling. But we're really in sort of the early stages of this sort of whole, new process, new world of things coming out for, the Avatar.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm most positive about here is just that they are talking about it in the perspective of like multiple shows and stuff like that. While we, I suppose, know that the movie is like the first project, it seems like they're planning an entire like opening phase of content or whatever. So,
Hmm.
I do get the impression that when they announce stuff, it probably will be more than just, here's the one project that we're working on. That would probably be enough to satisfy fans, but the way they've been talking about this, it feels like they're going to do similar stuff to what like Star Wars has done in terms of announcing all their different shows and animated shows,
Yeah.
and just have like you've got this, and this small thing as well. So when exactly that happens, it's hard to judge because this podcast, we thought, I think it happened like months ago, but I think based on some of the stuff that they say in some of the more recent podcasts, it might have only been like a couple of weeks ago. Like when we're recording this podcast now, this interview came out already a few weeks ago, but I got the impression that they'd only recorded the interview with Mike and Brian like at most maybe a month ago, rather than it being like closer to February or something like that. Because after the first 3, 4 podcasts, it seemed like they'd pretty much caught up and were aware like we're now seeing the reaction to the podcast that we've just released. So
Yeah.
that's interesting. I think they roughly talked about they probably will have multiple conversations with Mike and Brian. So maybe when they do more openly talk about what it is, we'll see them come on and say some stuff. But yeah, that's really all there is to say there. One of the other podcasts that has come out in the meantime is the Eric Coleman interview, who obviously they mentioned quite heavily across these two Mike and Brian interviews. It's a nice companion to the Mike and Brian interview, but I don't think there's anything particularly to talk about. But it was interesting for me just to hear just one of the sort of Nick execs, the big business people, sort of talk about it and see how invested in Avatar he is, and that a lot of it was he, as the head of Nickelodeon at the time, wanted Nickelodeon to do a more plot-driven show, which is why we got Avatar and why it feels so different than everything else. But did you listen to the Eric Coleman interview?
Yeah, I did. That one was pretty good. I mean, as for his sort of behind the scenes look of things and how, you're actually sort of, pitched the show, or his method specifically for, sort of creating new content at that time, and how that was more among the sort of like unique side of doing things, and how that sort of was able to sort of, he was able to sort of like give feedback and sort of direct things just in terms of high level, and then how, eventually he was able to pitch that to his bosses, and how, he mentioned how that was a pretty easy sale in this case here to actually sort of get Avatar made, from the get-go here. So, it's definitely a good one to check out if you're more interested in sort of the behind-the-scenes production side of things, and just to sort of, get both sides of the mentions here from the previous interviews.
Yeah. And there's an interesting conversation towards the end where he sort of talks about, they ask him about like, well, what format for the new shows would you like? Would you like it to be each
Hmm.
episode released weekly or like all at once? And he definitely comes across as someone who wants it weekly to sort of have that conversation actually like be a thing, because he talked in quite depth about like waiting a decent amount of time to show his own kids Avatar so that they could have a
Yeah,
proper
that was nice.
discussion about it. So that was interesting. And yeah, just to hear like he really knows his Avatar. He's having like big character discussions about the dynamics and so on. So that was nice to hear. But yeah, the podcast continues to be pretty good. So that's good. We'll have, I think, a little bit more to say about that in terms of some of the, stuff that we maybe missed surrounding like trademarks a bit later on. But the next piece of news is once again the German publisher for the Avatar books, CrossCult, has seemingly revealed one, maybe two things that we didn't really know about before. They post two new kind of Suki Alone preview pages mentioning that like they have the materials to do the translation, and they talk in the main sort of body of their post about the idea that they consider this to be the last volume of Avatar: The Last Airbender comics, at least in this drawing style, and that the next volumes are in the chibi style. So that, at this point, I suppose suggests that they don't know anything into the future about more Avatar comics to directly follow up the one-shots. They just know that chibi is what's next. Are they confirming there that that is the replacement? That's the role the chibi comics are taking? I'm not sure. But the fact that they do have information seemingly about the previous time we talked about these cross-cult was they seem to know that there's a new novel coming next year. And in the comments, when asked a little bit more about this stuff, they talk about how at least Korra is staying in the usual style. In any case, a new comic trilogy is planned for 2022. So, again, is this them using insider information that they have, that they know for sure a Korra comic is coming in 2022? Or is this just them assuming, like us as fans assume, that we know a new Korra comic has been in production? We don't know if it's still in production, but 2022, we've never heard direct confirmation that that's when it's coming, just that we assume one is coming. Obviously, it's really weird to judge how much insider information this is or not, but it's more than we get from anywhere else because they are an official publisher, just in a different language of all the books. So I assume they are notified a little bit ahead of time about these things. So, we haven't yet heard about the new novel. We haven't yet heard about the new Korra comic, but it seems like, yeah, they are logically two things we're probably going to see eventually, and especially if they're now more incorporated with Avatar Studios, it makes maybe sense that they're going to wait and announce them all sort of combined together a little bit. But what are your thoughts on this cross-cult information here?
Yeah, everything that they're, sort of saying and that we're sort of translating, and with them being, a official publisher of it, it all seems to make sense. It just seems odd, as we've been mentioning, that we're just sort of getting it in these sort of bite-sized formats, and they're sort of like, some of them are even just like replies to other people's questions. So, it just seems odd that it seems odd that they're responding in this way, and that if they are such in, league with, Avatar Studios or whatever, that they would say this as much, which, I guess it's not that much because you have to translate it from like the main native language that, everything's being produced in. Maybe they don't see like the extraness in like sort of putting it out there, but clearly, people like us are paying attention to it. So I don't know, how that'll handle or going forward from there, but everything that they're saying sounds cool. I definitely am down for some more books, and for Korra to come back in the comic format is definitely pretty cool to see. I wish we would get more actual official information on it, like either artists or stories or something like that. But 2022, that seems like a reasonable time, even though it's way over what we would have already liked at this point. But maybe that sort of assumption is just based off of timing with other things that is going to come out next year as well.
Mm-hmm. The next piece of news is something we've been waiting for, and that is that they properly announced the art of the animated series for Korra Book 3 Change. So we got a look at the new cover and what the deluxe edition set is going to look like, as well as the release date. So February 15th, 2022 is the release date that we have at this point. The deluxe edition has a fire symbol on it this time out. The deluxe edition portfolio thing has the obviously original Book 3 Change cover as the image, and then our new cover, who I don't think we have direct confirmation on who did this, but it looks kind of Joaquim dos Santos to me, but I'm not really sure. is you have the Red Lotus members in the sort of their elemental colors. You have a Red Lotus symbol in the background, and then you have Korra in the Avatar state with the chains as well. So kind of hitting most of the key beats that you'd expect from Korra Book 3. I really like the covers and the colors, and I like a lot of the way they've done the images with the characters. So I'm pretty impressed with this, as I have been with I think all of the new covers. But Greg, what are your thoughts on the new Book 3 Change art book, second edition information?
Yeah, no, I really like the cover on this one. I think this one might be one of my favorites from the new ones that they're doing, and it really inclines me towards, checking it out more, even though I already have all of them already. But no, I think this one is definitely really cool.
hmm Yeah, I had a little bit of a discussion about like how, why is it fire for Book 3 Change? But I think, as other people have sort of pointed out, I think it's more that with the ATLA Deluxe Edition slipcase, they use just a glider symbol. So they want the 4 after that to represent the element a little bit more, in that Book 1 Air has air. And that makes sense. They used more water related stuff for the Book 2 Spirits one. And then the Book 4 one is obviously going to be Earth related, having either an Earth or an Earth Empire symbol. So even though it's not like super like on theme for Book 3 with the fire symbol, I guess it makes sense for just the slipcases themselves. That's the best logic I've seen, but still, I like these. I'm in at this point on the deluxe edition, so I can't really complain too much. But that's the other interesting thing actually is the release date. This now means that there is a lot of books coming out in February. We have 2 deluxe editions in the space of a week. So February 15, 2022, Book 3 Change, deluxe edition, and normal edition. The week after, on the 22nd, that's the more recent date for Beast of the Four Nations, which is also a deluxe edition. So if you're getting the deluxe editions, that's like quite a lot of money to spend over the course of those 2 weeks. And then you also have, in the middle of all of this, the North and South Omnibus is out, I think also on the 22nd. And then I think just the week before the 15th is, like the 8th of February, is the first Chibi comic. So there's like 4 Avatar book releases within like 3 weeks in February. So it's a really weird thing with all the delays that we've had for it to line up in this way. So unless something big Avatar is happening in February, I don't really get why, we're, by the looks of things, going to go about 6-7 months with like no content after Suki Alone comes out, and then all the books kind of come out within 2 weeks. What are your thoughts on that? I'm pretty sure some dates are going to change again, but what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean the whole date changing, that's sort of like an unfortunate norm at this point. But yeah, I mean, like you said, unless there is something that's going to be announced in February, which I don't know, most of these items seem like there's anything really big that needs to like coincide with them sort of coming out. So switching them around and stuff doesn't seem too odd to me, just in general, just in terms of just spacing out content. But it's also like how things are working in production and shipping and all of that sort of thing. So it may just happen to be that everything's sort of timed out together. But yeah, no, I don't know. It is interesting that that's sort of where everything has been moved to, but things can always keep moving.
Next piece of news is just that there was no Avatar panel at San Diego Comic-Con at all. No Avatar Studios, no comic panel or anything like that. Magpie Games, I think, did do some sort of a thing related to playtesting the game, which we'll get to, but other than that, nothing Avatar related at Comic-Con. What I will say is just that I didn't get the impression, looking at the schedule, that there was anything particularly huge across nearly all of the panels. The biggest thing that I saw was that I think they announced the new Dragon Ball movie at a panel, and that seemed about like the most kind of mainstream news thing. So I sort of get why, like, okay, the Comic-Con being like this year probably wasn't the big platform that they needed to make a big announcement, and it probably is still a little bit too early. But I think everyone now immediately turns their attention to the New York Comic Con time frame or their special edition online thing that they're going to be doing in or around the same time. So yeah, it was kind of a little bit disappointing initially, but I think everyone realizes that yeah, it's probably a little early, but there's still a sense for surely they have to say something before the end of the year, or at least before we get to like a year post announcement, because there really hasn't been any update at all. But what are your thoughts on this? Making the decision to not have any announcement Avatar related with Comic Con.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not really too surprised at that, honestly. I mean, there's not really anything big new that they really, would really be needed for like a solo panel or even like a combined panel. So, for what they're going for and how everything is sort of working right now, I guess that's just sort of not too surprising. I mean, by the end of the year, I guess, I would hope that there would be something, just, a mention of something. Like, I wouldn't really expect even anything really that big by the end of the year, honestly. At least in terms of like, what we would consider like big news. But, never know.
hmm Yeah, like, trailer release date, that's probably really far off. I think we're just looking for, some specifics so we can sort of stop speculating about what the first couple of projects are. Instead, we sort of know a rough like era type thing that we're dealing with. But anyway, next piece of news. We have a finalized cover, and also updated preview pages for the Avatar: The Last Airbender official cookbook from Inside Editions. So obviously we had sort of placeholder images for a while. Now we have finalized information. I can't remember if we talked about this on the previous podcast, but this book has changed its release date. It's now coming out on the 9th of November. I think it was previously August 31st. So it's received, about 5 weeks delay. But it is coming out roughly within the same general release window. New cover, I think, looks really nice. They've added a bit more color to it. You have a kind of quadrant for each of the 4 elements with one of its dishes highlighted. You have the elemental symbol there as well. And some of the text is a little bit different, but it's still called Avatar Official Cookbook, Recipes from the 4 Nations, and it's still by Jenny Dorsey. The, I suppose, 10 preview pages we have this time out are for the mung bean and tofu curry, Monkey Atso's fruit pies, Yue's mooncakes, jasmine green tea, and sizzle crisps. And I suppose also an insight into what the, I suppose, finalized flavor text for all of these dishes basically are. I think visually it looks a lot better with regards to just the images, the cover, and so on. The flavor text I don't think is particularly strongly written. It's like hitting the general kind of beats that you want in terms of like Aang mentioning this makes sense. I just don't think it's like amazing writing or anything like that. It doesn't feel like there's too much new to it or anything. So if we were looking for this to actually have maybe anything new in terms of the flavor text, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. So it very much is going to be, do you have an interest in this book to make some Avatar inspired recipes? That's the reason to get this book. So that was kind of just interesting to get. But I think it looks a whole lot better in terms of its presentation. But what are your thoughts on the more finalized look at this cookbook?
I do agree. It definitely looks like they took a bit more time to actually develop things, and what we saw before, as we probably assumed, was just like a really early like preview of it, just to sort of get things up there and just to have the sort of listing ready, which maybe that's why this took a little bit of a hit in the release date of it as well. But no, right now it definitely looks really cool. And yeah, it's really, I mean, as we pretty much already assumed, it really is just about, making the food that's sort of themed around the show. There's not really, it's not something you're going to go to for any sort of in-depth, lore or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's a book that's coming out. I have most of the books ordered. I'm really hesitating if I should get this one or not. So uh, it might end up just being one of those things where like I've been pretty good on the channel about like touching on at least a little bit of everything when it comes to reviews. So closer to the time, I probably will end up getting this just for the sake of it. But anyway, next up is probably the biggest piece of news there is to talk about here, and that is there's a couple of things here. It's one, we got the finalized title for the role-playing game from Magpie Games. We got the date that the Kickstarter is going to go live on, and they gave us the free quick start guide as well. But before we jump into the exact details of that, let's talk about the name and what the name sort of tells us about other stuff, and that is that it's called the Avatar Legends role-playing game. So when asked about this on Twitter, they said that they got the Avatar Legends name and logo from Avatar Studios, and that from their perspective, Avatar Legends is going to be used on other Avatar merchandise and places. If you look into Avatar Legends, there was actually news back in May when Viacom applied for the trademark for both Braving the Elements, the name of the podcast, and Avatar Legends, and they applied for Avatar Legends under both all these categories. So clothing, footwear, headgear, leather, imitations of leather, which is basically like luggage bags, backpacks, that sort of stuff, games, toys, sports equipment, paper, cardboard, and goods made of these materials, and scientific and electric apparatus and instruments, which includes stuff like video games, computer games, and like all stuff that relates to that, including like smartphone cases and so on. Now, obviously that doesn't confirm they're doing all of these pieces of merchandise, but it means that we're probably highly likely to get more official, straight from Nickelodeon merchandise that uses Avatar Legends branding, I guess. And I think this is a good title overall to use for that sort of stuff, because we've always been talking about, like, why does everything in Avatar have to either be ATLA branded or Korra branded? Why don't we just have a more general title? Why do the Kyoshi novels have to be ATLA, The Rise of Kyoshi? Avatar Legends actually sounds a little bit better, because it's like, yeah, that's the franchise when you can't just call it Avatar. So we'll see where they use it. It is interesting that surprisingly the places Avatar Legends doesn't seem to be used is necessarily for like comics / books or like TV show type things. But if we get more official merchandise line that relates to it, I think this is a good use of the name. But what were your thoughts when this got revealed, that it's the name of the game, but it's also just going to be, I suppose, a branding term that we see for Avatar?
Yeah, no, I think, like you said, it definitely works in terms of just putting everything underneath one sort of, mega title and then just branching it out from there, since, like you said, we have been not really knowing what to really call things, and we have, other things that we have been using, such as like the Avatar verse and other things like that. So, I think if this is what we're going to go for, and that, with this trademark and all these other sort of potential merch and other stuff that they're going to be making around it, that the fact that they do have a name, I mean, I guess really all of this is just really showing, at least as of now, how much support they're putting behind this endeavor, which is, if anything you got from the podcast with Mike and Brian, that's probably the one thing that you can sort of keep in mind, that they do seem to have a lot of support, and they're really sort of pushing this as, I guess, probably their main sort of thing in terms of something that can reach out to a lot of people, a lot more people than it might have before.
Mm-hmm. And like, it seemingly doesn't go as far as to basically refer to the franchise as Avatar Legends, but I think that actually makes her a decent, like, general fandom title. Like, I think everyone's always going to be like, Avatar refers to this universe, and there really shouldn't be the confusion with the Blue People Avatar. But we, I suppose, for trademark reasons, can't just use Avatar. So Avatar Legends makes sense that, typically we are focusing on an avatar, and each avatar, I suppose, is a legend of the Avatar universe. So it seems nice enough. But anyway, going back to where this all came from, the official proper reveal, I suppose, of the game. So it's called Avatar Legends role playing game. The Kickstarter is launching on August 3rd. If you sign up for their newsletter, you can get yourself a copy of the Quick Start Guide, which is a full 55-page, PDF, full color, and lots of details about the game. And then the most recent update on this is that they're posting what are they calling this? A pre-launch stretch goal. So they have a sort of, ready to go sort of like a Kickstarter page, but it's currently just on a sort of pre-launch kind of situation, and you can follow it when it actually goes live. And if they can get 2,500 people to follow the pre-launch, they will be unlocking a dice pack for the Avatar Legends role-playing game, which is going to have 2 waterbender dice, 2 earthbender dice, 2 airbender dice, 2 firebender dice, 2 weapons expert dice, and then 2 technology expert dice, which are the sort of 6 sort of training disciplines within the game. So they seem really cool in terms of, if you're playing one of these characters, you're probably going to want to use these branded ones as your actual set of dice. So I suppose before we get into the quick start guide and how exactly the game sort of like works and stuff like that, what are your thoughts just so far on like how they've done this sort of more a bigger official big announcement of the game?
No, I think the way that they're going about doing the announcement, I think this is pretty cool. I think the fact that they're trying to get, everyone sort of involved with it and sort of add this like pre-launch stretch goal, which they're almost at already. So they'll probably get to that hopefully. No, I think they're, I don't know. I like the way that they're going about it because they've been doing stuff for a while, even before this, as you know. So, they've been doing like play testing, and if you follow the newsletter already, then you're, pretty much aware of all that stuff. And, potentially you could have actually already, played it as well, or at least sort of baited it more or less. So no, I think, they seem to be putting a lot of effort into, this whole production of how they're sort of launching it. So I think they're really trying to put a lot behind it, which, I think it seems like it's worth it. It definitely seems like a lot of people are interested, and, people have already started trying to do things with it. So no, I like the way that they're going about it. They seem to be very out there as opposed to a lot of other different things in terms of just getting the news out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're at 2,212 followers by what my page says anyway, so they're going to get that because they only launched this like a couple of days ago, and they're already at this number. They've got like a week and a couple of days before it launches, so I think we're going to launch with this in place. And then if you take a look at like their previous game that's also powered by the Apocalypse, the same game sort of engine, we assume some of the other stretch goals are just going to be other materials like this to help you play the game, including probably the big one for me would be that like if they do like Avatar world maps, and like you actually get nice versions of them, that's going to be pretty cool. I suppose cards with a lot of the sort of details that you probably would just have to look up in the book, and that sort of stuff that just will assist you with playing the game, I think is going to be exciting. But I find myself actually really, really invested in when this Kickstarter goes live, just in a way to get a judge of how popular Avatar really is, because we're going to see the contrast of basically the same type of game and compare the previous one, which was Root, which was successful. It was successfully backed and did quite well, compared to like Avatar, but like big licensed, franchise on the kind of up and up, just to see how they do. Because I think it's like Root was like 6,500 backers for $600,000. So that's what Avatar has to sort of go up against. And so, 2,500 followers before the thing even launches, I think that's a pretty good on track thing to sort of, you've got this many people to like either who already have a Kickstarter account or to make one and follow the game to get this thing to happen. It's, I think, going to do like really, really well. And probably the most telling thing of all is that in the post that they put up on their website, they didn't even talk about the idea of this not meeting any goals. They are just using Kickstarter as sort of a mechanism to do pre-orders for this game. Like this game is happening. It's not like if will it happen. It's no, it is happening. This is just a good way for them to manage the complicated stretch goal stuff and so on. So it's there's a lot of confidence on this as well. But what are your thoughts on how do you think this is going to do versus like their previous Kickstarters, because it's Avatar?
Yeah, no, I mean, it seems to me like, and I don't know anything about Rude or the history behind that or anything like that. It seems like it's more of an original type of thing, but having a franchise behind it, and sort of the backing that they have, and with if it gets like any sort of shout out on any whatever we would consider official like Avatar, like pages or social media or anything like that, like it probably would exponentially go up as well, I would suspect. So just keeping all of that in mind, I don't see how it can not be funded with whatever their actual official sort of goal is. And the fact that it does have like sort of a basis of just it's going to be out there regardless of how this particularly does, just as to sort of just how successful and how popular it really is. I mean, I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot that's already sort of in place for this to succeed. So it would be really surprising if it doesn't do well.
Mm. Yeah, but based on what people are saying, who I think follow like are part of like their Discord and stuff like that, it does seem like getting the full sort of like Kickstarter package when it goes live is going to be the way to get like everything to do with this game, and that the root game has like deluxe books, like with like fancy covers and like a box to store the books in, and then like I said, all the sort of physical accessories like dice and maps and so on, which even if you're maybe not super invested in like going hardcore into the game, is the sort of like merchandise sort of stuff that we don't really get otherwise, and just the fact that this sort of has a foundation and like that it's going to have a basis in the lore so what stories to sort of tell. That's sort of information that's kind of interesting, just getting like Avatar dice, Avatar maps, that sort of thing. So I've been interested in it just from that perspective as well, but I have read the game, the quick start guide in full, and it seems really, really interesting and detailed. Like, they're giving this thing away for free, and it's like 55 pages of I guess a like 200 plus page final book, and they give you like a general story to go off. They even have like pre-generated characters here, but they also give you the information to make your own characters. I like overall how they've done this, and they've already put out one update to this. Like, it's already on Quick Start version 1.1, so they're already taking like feedback into play. So it's not perfect so far, but I definitely like what I'm seeing so far. There's a lot of interesting mechanics. It was the first version of the Quick Start Guide was weird because there was basically like no mention of like what dice you use, and like just that fundamental like this is how as a player you play the game. And it was kind of weird that they had to like add that in later, unless you found the one moment in the guide that actually mentioned that you use 2 6-sided dice to play the game. So they have like really from early fundamentals how you play the game, but they missed out on some kind of key information like that. Other than that, it seems like they have their like lore correct and all that sort of stuff, in terms of they're making some kind of deep cuts here in terms of like mentioning the likes of Shayu and Tokuga and all the Kyoshi references as well. I want to see like, do they go full on in the final book in terms of mentioning stuff like Dao Fei? Here are example of Dao Fei names. How many place names are they going to reference if they give you a map? That sort of information. Because from what I could see, there's like one piece of like fully new information that I didn't know about before in this book, and that is that they seemingly present to us a alternate name for Royal Caldera City, which is Harry Bolkan, which, according to what I've heard some people say, is just Royal Caldera City in a different language, but still it's not something that we actually knew about officially before. So that seems like an actual sort of canon piece of information rather than just a sort of made up fact for this specific Forbidden Scroll story. But what are your thoughts looking at the quick start guide about how this game actually kind of plays and how it looks in terms of like this is roughly, I suppose, a quarter of the main book, give or take?
Yeah, no, this is really, I mean, when I first saw it, I thought that this was really sort of like involved, which I guess is pretty standard for these type of games when you really look at it and seeing some of the other like D&D type of books, those are really, really involved. So I guess this is really just sort of early on par with those. But no, I don't know, it seems like they put a lot of effort into sort of theming it towards Avatar and sort of making it make sense within the world. And I like how they actually do the character creation and how, they basically set it up so that you can really fill it in and, set up your own character. So no, I don't know, from what I've seen of this and what I understand of it, it definitely seems like, if this is your type of thing and you can get, a group of people together to do this, that this is really going to be a fun time to have.
Yeah, because it seems like there is like quite a complicated group of systems in play. In that there's the obvious stuff like you have some stats and you roll based on those stats, and you have like modifiers depending on what character you're playing, to like talk to characters, plead with characters, that sort of thing. And then in combat, you can choose to defend, evade, attack. And there are techniques. That's probably the one weakness of the quick starter, is that there's a section where they talk about bending where it sort of just feels like they're not particularly committed either way to like if they want to go really hardcore into bending or not, or like it's up to you, or but there are techniques. I wish there was a little bit more of a sense for like deep into your campaign, what does like a master bender actually like look like in terms of like what high level skills are they, because they kind of just like hand wave it as like, well, you can use waterbending to do whatever you want within the story, but then they clearly reference the fact that you train to learn moves and even hint at the idea of like you have to meet a specific character along the journey to learn, say, metal bending, but then they don't actually really explain like what that does for you necessarily in terms of an ability. It's weird because all the made up characters here, none of them really actually have a bending technique, and then it's only one of the NPC characters who's actually described as having a like firebending technique, and it's like, oh, that's cool. Why don't you include a little bit more of that to get a sense for it? Because the only thing reading through it is just that like you read the character types and descriptions, and it feels like, okay, it's specific sort of character archetypes, but I'm a bender, and then I'm just doing these very general moves like what are they called, like overwhelm, a general move called wall of perfection, disorient instead of fire pinwheel like one of the NPCs have, that sort of thing. Like I understand why they've gone down the path of not having the sort of character created the playbook things just be like firebender, because they don't want it to be laser focused on just bending. But I feel they almost go too far in the other direction, to where like they don't actually give you enough information so far on it being cool to actually be a bender within this game, outside of saying that like, oh, if you're chasing a ship you can just use your bending to kind of pull it back in some way. But what are your thoughts on how they actually execute stuff like bending and some of the more Avatar specific elements within this game?
Yeah, I wonder if this is just from sort of the perspective of that they're still developing things and that this is just sort of like the quick start versus, later on in the PDF where they do, they do say like some specific moves, even if they are for like, characters that you're actually controlling directly. They're more like just like the GM type of characters, the NPC. So it seems like they do have like moves that they would like you to use in mind, and I'm sure there will be, a lot more when they actually come to it. But I don't know. I guess the idea of it being more open-ended doesn't seem like it's the worst thing ever, because with bending you really the limit is really what you can think up of. So I like that there is some flexibility there, but maybe there will be more structure to sort of how it sort of like interacts directly with the characters as they sort of come up with the more and more fleshed out version of the whole sort of Avatar Legends RPG book.
Yeah, because like you say, I think that sort of stuff will be there in the game, and like you'll have like, here's the list of like waterbender moves that you can learn, and here's, I guess, some implementation of something like metal bending for earth bending, lightning redirection. Here's what it technically does, lightning generation, because as much as they're trying to maybe more like you tell the story yourself, we don't want to be locked in and being all about bending, there's still always going to be an element of people want to do the sort of level up things and get the special moves that they know about from the lore and stuff like that. So it'd be a bit weird if they didn't have that. Similarly, it doesn't look like there's really any mention of like how you go about like using the avatar in your story if you wanted to. I get that's probably complicated, but I think it would be a mistake to just not include sort of a quote unquote official way to actually incorporate the avatar into your story if you wanted to, even if just as an NPC, or even if you wanted to maybe have one of the player characters play as the avatar. But we'll see how that works in the end. The other thing is that like they have obviously the combat system, and it seems to work on like a fatigue kind of track thing, but there's this whole other system called balance that's kind of related to that in a way, in that like when something bad happens with like bad dice rolls, it's not all about you take health damage, basically fatigue. Some of the bad things that can happen are that like your balance shifts to one thing or the other, and that like in the book they give the example that if you're an idealist character, your balance track is between forgiveness and action, and you start in the middle, but if you're shifted off balance by something bad happening, you might be all about action, or you might move all the way over to being all about forgiveness. And that's another way to sort of put the player character at risk, is not just their health being in danger, but that their actions will now have to be more informed by this specific principle than anything else. So I like that there's sort of like 2-3 different mechanics that you have to kind of keep track of for your character. And it even includes a sort of thing where like when you go back to the middle after maybe being further away, you get this sort of almost like ultimate move, where like it's called like moment of balance, and you can really like dominate a scene with that kind of thing. So they seem to be including a sort of like character arc style system in the game as well. But what are your thoughts on the whole balance mechanic?
Yeah, no, I think that's actually pretty interesting. I mean, I'm sure many video games, but one I think of is Mass Effect, where it has that whole sort of renegade paragon side to things. So the fact that they're instituting that in this game seems pretty on point. I mean, and the whole idea of, finding balance and all of that, that's like the perfect idea for something that would be in the Avatar universe. So I think having that mechanic here, and if it's implemented as well as it seems to be on text here, then I think that's a pretty cool thing. I mean, that definitely you can see how that can work out for the benefit or not benefit of the characters or the party in general. So no, I think that's definitely a pretty cool idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, overall it just makes me excited to see what they say more of in the Kickstarter and then in the final book as well. Because I think this is actually going to be a pretty big piece of news, I suppose, when the Kickstarter goes live, just to keep track of how successful it is, what Kickstarter extras they actually have in that, especially if they're getting sort of like specifically told, use the Avatar Legends branding and logos. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we are kind of maybe a little bit blown away by some of the kind of stretch goal stuff that they actually have going on. But you know, not too long to wait. August 3rd, so a week and a few days until we get to see that. And it does look like their campaigns are like international friendly and that they will ship pretty much anywhere, so that's good. Next piece of news is not the video game news we necessarily want, but it actually seems like people have quite a bit of hope for this. So the new game coming out is Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, which is a Smash Bros. Like fighting game where it's more about smashing your opponents off the arena rather than like health bar style stuff. So it's using characters from Nickelodeon shows as the cast instead of obviously Nintendo characters. So the IGN got the exclusive sort of reveal of this game, and it includes, you know, TMNT characters, Wild Thornberrys, Ren and Stimpy, SpongeBob, of course, Hey Arnold, Rugrats, that sort of stuff. But interestingly, in terms of really obvious announcements, Avatar wasn't necessarily included. Like, they didn't officially reveal any Avatar character or anything like that. But in the sort of placeholder cover for the game that they put out, it's all silhouettes of the kind of front of box characters, and you can clearly see that Korra and what looks to be very likely Aang are featured on that cover. So Korra and Aang are going to be characters you can play as in this game, and in the trailer you get to see a Western Air Temple stage. So that's going to be pretty cool to fight on, in that there's like a glider in the background. You can see the airbender symbol. So they're not talking about it right now, but there's definitely Avatar content in this game. And I think the fact that they didn't include it in the announcement gives you the idea of there's going to be like a secondary announcement, and they're going to make a big deal about all the new characters that they have. And I'm guessing they'll have a whole specific Avatar reveal at some point. So they'll also use the Avatar hype to build up this game. But yeah, people actually seem quite excited about this because it's going for the Smash Bros. Style. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, no, it definitely seems cool in general. I mean, I think, you know, the Smash Brothers style of game, you know, to just sort of all out for, you know, for versus sort of Brawl has definitely been successful, as, you know, the many iterations of Smash Brothers have come out since, what was it? The first one was an N64. So, you know, I think in terms of a route that they can go for, I think this is definitely one that, you know, is probably, other than like, what was it? The other Nick racing game. This is probably like the next best thing you can do to sort of get all your characters in one game at one time. And, you know, of course, as they keep going and you can add more DLC for more characters and so forth and so forth, there's like no limit to the characters that they can add, with, you know, all the history of characters that they've, you know, come out with over the years. So, you know, I think it's definitely pretty cool. It'll definitely be really cool to see when they do have, you know, Korra and Aang and whatever other characters they might, you know, want to put in it, which, you know, as far as characters that would be more sort of like battle oriented, of course, those would be like the first ones that I would think of from most of, you know, Nickelodeon's lineup. But considering they can really add any character and have their own sort of unique, you know, fight set, you know, pretty much anyone can work. So no, it definitely seems cool. I wish it was on more than just consoles for me personally, but otherwise it seems really cool, and I'm sure this seems like this would be a lot more worth it to pick up just, you know, for specific characters that you want to play versus compared to like the racing game per se. So I think this one definitely, if it's developed well and it, you know, works as well as, you know, it seems to in the previews, that this would definitely be one to check out, assuming it doesn't cost like a lot of money or wait for it to be on sale.
Yeah, because the Kart Racer 2 game came out. I didn't really see it really take off within the Avatar fandom, even though some people were talking about it when it got announced and we saw that it had Avatar content in it. But this one, because you actually are going to get to fight as Korra and Aang, immediately has impact, because okay, we can do Aang versus Korra. We can have Korra, getting her revenge against SpongeBob for laughing at her in that
Yeah.
episode, and then all these other kind of situations of like the Turtles versus Avatar characters. Like they're pretty fun. Like Nickelodeon has a good lineup of characters, and we'll see how far they go, because they note here that there's like Michelangelo and Leonardo for the Turtles, but I assume they'll have all four and maybe even more. So for Avatar, we'd assume okay they're doing Aang, Korra. They're not going to skip out on an opportunity to do say like a Zuko or a Toph or a Katara. So by the end, I'm assuming we'll have a good amount of characters and more stages for Avatar as well. So this game is coming out in the fall, I think is what they said. Yeah, fall 2021. So that means that within the next 4 months, they're going to have to like announce basically everything about this. Because fall like it's at the latest like November and is realistically like August and November. So yeah, coming months, I guess they'll have to do something like this, and yeah, I fully expect like a specific sort of like Avatar themed like news announcement about this game, so that should be exciting. But yeah, there's that. Next piece of news is this Hollywood Reporter article that's mainly about other Nickelodeon stuff, but it's an interview with Nickelodeon president and CEO Brian Robbins, who I think we have heard talk about Avatar before. Towards the bottom of this, he gets asked the question. The reporter says, I reported a story last year about how Backish's strategy was to license to third-party outlets in a bid to expose content to bigger audiences before ultimately taking it back as an exclusive. Is that your strategy as well? And he says, that's been my strategy from the start. There's two great examples of that. Avatar The Last Airbender was a series that ran for 3 seasons on Nickelodeon and was never a huge show, but had an amazing following. We licensed that show to Netflix and it exploded. Then we put the spin-off of Avatar, Legend of Korra, on Paramount Plus and it crushed it. That led us to our new relationship and bringing the creators of Avatar back to Nickelodeon to form Avatar Studios. We are now on our way to a full-fledged franchise strategy, creating films and spin-offs out of Avatar. He also brings up iCarly as another example of something similar to this, in that I think iCarly has already had the first season of its sort of reboot go up on Paramount Plus. And then they basically just confirm Avatar and iCarly will both be taken off Netflix and come to Paramount Plus as an exclusive, which is fairly obvious. Beyond that, I personally don't remember anything else Avatar related being in the article, but Greg, what are your thoughts on what he had to say here about Avatar Studios?
Yeah, no, I mean, that seemed like that was their big ploy and their big push from the get-go, to just sort of, get it out there, get the buzz, and, I don't think to any of us it's that surprising that it did as well as it did do. I mean, it was there before, if anyone can remember way back in the day. It was actually on Netflix, and a lot of other countries have long since had Avatar on Netflix. It just happened to be America, just didn't have it for whatever licensing reason. So yeah, no, I mean, that seems like it's a good way. I mean, there's a ton of users, and Netflix for the most part has been until recently the most predominant player in terms of streaming online. So if there's any place that you want to push your content first before trying to get people back to your platform, that would be the one that I would think of going to as well. That will be, of course, unfortunate for a lot of people who just have Netflix and don't have Paramount Plus at all. Because it's just another one that you have to get. I don't know, it does make me wonder if it will still be on VOD services. So like if you were to use Amazon, could you just buy it like how you used to be able to do for when Korra came out? Because I remember that's how I did it back then. So I do wonder how the VOD side of things are going to go forward, but that's definitely something that we're going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, like I think the main thing from this that people reacted to was obviously the line, Avatar was a series that ran for 3 seasons on Nickelodeon and was never a huge show, but had an amazing following. It's kind of like, um, uh, okay, really, was it? It's a weird one because like it feels wrong to say that it was never a huge show when it was super successful and like had like amazing ratings back when it actually originally aired. Like the numbers for like the finale and stuff like that are quite big, especially considering how sort of low most TV ratings are for stuff nowadays. Um, I get it from the perspective of like, if it was like wildly, like amazingly successful back in 2008, there would have been more of a direct follow up. Like obviously they tried to do the movie, it didn't work. There was a bit of delay. They did Korra. Korra was successful, but didn't, I suppose, move the needle as much as maybe they thought it would. So they, it really just, I suppose, puts into perspective that we all view Avatar returning to Netflix as being a big thing, but it's like this is like the factor. Like it was big numbers that made the high up business people actually take notice of Avatar again, and that directly has led to basically everything that's happened since. So they view the Netflix numbers as being the biggest thing of all, rather than any fandom success there was back in 2008 and so on. Um, how do you take what he says about it there in terms of it was never a huge show but had an amazing following?
Yeah, no, I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think, I wonder, like we're always saying, like, what is their sort of like comparison point for, their metrics? Because, like you said, from the ratings that we know of, the Nelson ratings, it did, pretty well overall, and especially like the finale episodes for both shows did rather well. And even when Korra was taken off the direct airwaves, it still did really well as sort of an online thing. So I don't know. I mean, I guess in comparison to some other things, maybe it's not sort of on this sort of same tier level in terms of like extra sort of material around it. And like you said, if it did do so amazingly stand out from its original run, the follow up, and it probably would have continued since then. But I don't know. I think it's also just an interesting note of just sort of like the changing times in general in terms of how much more is valued on sort of like streaming numbers and streaming sort of potential, which, when the show originally came out, even when Korra was out, that wasn't really a thing. Like, there were, VOD services and Netflix was around then, but it wasn't, it wasn't as such of a consideration. And I don't know, the numbers, I don't know if we even know sort of like what the official numbers that Netflix has for, Avatar and Korra, because Netflix holds a lot of that stuff really close. Unless it's like really good, then they'll let the numbers out, and even that can be circumspect to whatever sort of metric they're using for it. So everything is sort of like iffy in that sort of space there. But like you said, whatever those numbers that they were feeding back to CBS Viacom was clearly enough that they're able to put more faith in it. And that seems to be, a good thing as far as what we're concerned, as far as getting more content. So I don't know. It is interesting to see, how things are going now, and, how it will continue going forward. And I don't know, I guess I really just hope that the numbers, I guess, continue up for whatever. I mean, I guess a thing, to keep in mind will just be to see, how many people do jump into Paramount Plus for these new properties that do come out, especially if they are, at least upon launch, really like exclusively locked down to Paramount Plus, because that'll really be sort of a thing. And a lot of people I've seen comments online, they're like, I'll just have to sort of wait and see before switching to Paramount Plus and going into their sort of content, because they do have a lot of stuff. But if you're not, it's like anything else, if you're not into the shows, then you're not really willing to go there. So it's, I don't know, it's something that we're going to have to sort of wait and see what the new sort of, I guess, metric points actually are.
Yeah, because like we all noticed like the success again of Avatar on Netflix, because it was that was basically the reason we thought in any way that something could happen at the Paramount Plus event. Why we actually went into that being like, well, we don't have any super reason to be super optimistic, but they're talking about it again. Like, the business people are talking about it again. That's a good sign. And then it actually happened in a bigger way than we ever thought. So the fact that, like, it didn't just get a new show, but it got a whole studio, obviously is the the big success here, that they view it as basically one of their top franchises. The fact that it was like mentioned right next to like Criminal Minds and all this other stuff as like, yeah, one of our like top 5 things that come to mind to mention. So that is big. Obviously it feels, again, weird, just the direct comment that he made here, but I guess those digital numbers are quite big. Kind of makes me think of like during Korra, when they put the book 2 finale online, where you had to watch it on Nickelodeon, on the nick.com. And then afterwards, like, they came out and said that this was like a huge thing, like this was the biggest numbers they've ever seen on nick.com in terms of viewership on something. And it's like, oh well, Korra was sort of that example of that kind of transition point already, and that's why they did that. And that, who watches stuff on TV anymore, really, outside of like live sport? So there's the issue, but we'll see how this goes. At the very least, the big business people that we usually don't really care about too much are being positive about Avatar. But yeah, there's no real news there as such. Next piece of news is probably the biggest sort of like finally of the year, and that is that they finally gave us the cover for the Free Comic Book Day 2021 Avatar and Korra comic. The Free Comic Book Day Twitter account was like, we got word from Dark Horse that soon there'll be a cover reveal for this thing. A week later, finally we get it. There's still no description for this book, no preview pages, and obviously the event at this point is only like 3 weeks away. But we do have the cover. So Korra gets the main body of the cover. It is Jinora and Iki with Tenzin in the background, and I guess they're on Air Temple Island. Iki is sort of making fun of Jinora. Jinora's reacting to it, and then Tenzin seems a little bit upset at their antics. And then it says also featuring Avatar, and we have a sort of little insert sort of circular image of Iroh with some tea. And they clarified, okay, these creators are doing the Korra one, these creators are doing the Avatar one, and a few other things like that. The description still just says, like, celebrate the world of the 4 nations with 2 all-new stories from Avatar The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra. Your favorite characters from both generations of Avatar teams bring you some food for thought, more than a few laughs along the way. They still have the typo of saying some food for thought more than a few laughs along the way. So kind of still weird the way they've done it, but we have a better sense for like, okay, the Korra story is going to be, I guess, Air Kid focused with a bit of Tenzin, mainly on Iki and Jinora, and then Iroh gets the spotlight in the Avatar story. But what are your general thoughts on this finally getting the cover reveal?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just funny a bit just that it's taking this long to actually get it, and it still seems like we don't have like all the actual information from it. But I mean, I don't know, the idea of the Air Kids having their own sort of story here and Iroh having his own story on the flip side of the comic, I think, no, that seems like something that would work in a Free Comic Book Day comic. Like, it's not really, typically it's not going to be anything so like instrumental to the plot or moving things forward, and seeing as how we don't really know where exactly the Korra comics are actually going, or the one that we think is going to come out isn't going to come out until next year sometimes. It seems like it's something that could be like in the middle there that isn't really going to push the needle forward or anything like that. It's just sort of, like they say, they're just sort of like a fun little side story here.
Hmm. Dark Horse then on Twitter did state like, okay, these are the names of the stories. The Korra story is called Clearing the Air. It's written by Kiku Hughes, and then the cover art and Korra comic artist is Sam Beck, and Killian Ng is going to be doing the colors. The Avatar story is written by Nadia Shamas, and it's called Matcha Makers. Sarah Alpha is also involved there, and she did say that, to give some sense of what the book is about. She says, no spoilers, but we put my man on a date. So I guess it's Iroh going on a date here, and it's obviously related to tea as well. So that's fun. Iroh's story makes sense. What exactly will they do? Is it just going to be fun Iroh, or will we get some kind of other stuff going on there? Not really sure. I do hope Iki and Jinora can get something that's sort of more significant with their development, just because they need some more screen time in Clearing the Air. I hope it's not just sort of sibling back and forth, them arguing with each other, which has been a lot of the dynamic that we've had with the Air Kids, especially Jinora. I'd like to see her make a bit of more of a step forward, but these short stories, it's always a bit hit and miss if they get the story right. In that the two previous Korra free comics have been like, one is like really good, exactly what you want, the Korra Naga story, but then the more recent one, the Milo with the pets, really was a non-event, and that like no one ever talks about it. So not sure where this one will come. I'm guessing it'll probably be somewhere in the middle, but not too far away. They once again confirmed that the book will be available digitally after the event. They don't specify the exact details there, but I don't think they leave it too long. So, obviously I'm hoping that I can get a physical copy of this, but if not, it will be available for everyone for free digitally. So that is good. The main thing here, I'd just be like, I just don't like that there's not an official description to even start really the speculation, because the cover doesn't tell you all that much, and that's I think the main issue there. But Free Comic Book Day coming up. We will review this, I guess, whenever it comes out, and if there's all that much to say about it. So there's that. Getting into more recent news. First thing up is Jeremy Zuckerman just randomly posted on Twitter and said this: "To those who are wondering, I will not be working on the Netflix live-action ATLA adaptation. However, I am beyond excited to further explore the Avatar universe with Mike, Brian, and everyone else at Avatar Studios." So, basically announcing that he is part of Avatar Studios. That's interesting. I think we assumed that this was very likely going to be the case, and this is him shutting down the sort of rumors, I guess. I think it's people interpreting something he said, like basically I think the day the Netflix show got announced, that like, well, if Mike and Brian are involved, I assume I will be involved in that. They never really got far enough for music to come into play, so he was never really involved in that. However, here, I guess it basically confirms that we're at the point where they're starting to think about music, at the very least. So Jeremy Zuckerman is on board and is confirming that to us here. And I guess this also roughly gives us even more reason to believe that the ATLA and Korra soundtracks will happen, given that he's now involved with Avatar Studios, which is official with Nick ViacomCBS, who everyone, even the big business people, are talking about how cool Avatar is. So there's no reason for the soundtracks not to come out. We're just going to have to wait and see when exactly that is, because we can't forget all of the teases of basically him saying it's coming soon, more or less. But what are your thoughts on this? Effectively, the first proper update on Avatar Studios since the initial announcement, in terms of we now know a third person working in Avatar Studios.
Yeah, I guess from that perspective, yeah, that's kind of a big thing to actually know about a third person in it, although I'm gonna gather that or guess that there probably is a ton of people involved in it. It's just not really like structured for letting people know about it yet. But yeah, no, I mean, I don't. It does seem sort of like I think you mentioned like it just seems sort of random that this is just sort of something that he tweeted, but this is something that I guess he has sort of tweeted stuff like that before. And yeah, if there is any like sort of issues, or any sort of like questions about previous projects that he might have been worked on, is good, I guess, just to clear the air here. But no, I think it's a cool announcement. I mean, everyone loves the music from Avatar and Korra, so the fact that we're getting him to work on it again, it only seems like a positive. As far as like the actual sort of like music being released, I don't know. Who knows when that's actually going to happen, even though we're more-ish have more hope on it actually coming to fruition this time rather than before. It was just like, well, maybe if we can get the stuff. But now there seems, like you said, there is some backing behind it for once.
Yeah, and then like we assume this will probably give him the opportunity to just sort of basically force sort of an Avatar Legends type thing to just like to remaster a lot of those tracks, in that you know we need sort of an updated main Avatar theme. Like that's something that has to happen, I guess. Like do that, and that will likely lead to other stuff happening, in that we're expecting more Avatar, more Korra, and everything else in between. So yeah, like we're beginning to fill out the sort of check boxes basically on like stuff to make Avatar Studios good. We have the creators, Mike and Brian. We have the music basically sorted now. Now it's pretty much just like, I suppose, Sifu Kisu, the martial arts consultants, and animation studio. And once you hit those kind of points, it's like, yeah, we're more or less there. Even though obviously there's a lot more people going to be involved in the process, start to finish. But in terms of the really obvious things, like those are what we're waiting for. But yeah, I'm excited to see whenever some sort of an announcement happens. The fact that he's now, I suppose, officially part of Avatar Studios means that when he maybe gets to announce the Avatar Korra soundtrack, it's more official now, him saying that. So it's a step in the right direction. Whereas it felt a little more disconnected before, where he's like not exactly involved, but we assume he kind of is. So that's that. Final piece of news is this came out of absolutely nowhere, and there's not a lot of time to like act to get this thing, and that is Topps, known trading card maker, are doing a on-demand set for Avatar. It's called 2021 Topps On Demand. It's set number 4, Avatar: The Last Airbender. The product is only available from July 22nd to July 29th. So you only have a week to order this. It's going to be a product that they basically print to demand. Basically, this is sort of a new thing I've seen Topps especially do. What it is that you are buying for $9.99. You are buying a pack of 10 cards from a 20 card overall set. And in each pack you're going to get 9 normal cards and 1 parallel foil card. And they are saying that these parallels will be, there are blue parallels numbered up to 99, green numbered up to 50, red up to 25, white up to 10, black up to 5, and that there will be an Avatar 4 Elements parallel that there's only one of. The checklist of like all 20 cards that you can get are Aang, Avatar State Aang, Katara, Sokka, Appa, Momo, Toph, Prince Zuko, Team Avatar Zuko, Suki, Uncle Iroh, King Boomy, Avatar Roku, Team Avatar 1, Azula, Cabbage Merchant, Team Avatar 2, Mai, Ty Lee, and Jet. So yeah, they pretty much hit pretty much everything you'd want here. It doesn't seem like there's too many repeats or anything like that. $9.99 for like 10 high quality cards plus 1 foil, which I just reading this, I'm not sure if it's like, does that mean you by default get a numbered card, or is it just that you have an opportunity to get a numbered card? I'm not really sure, but the setup seems quite nice here, even though it probably would have been better if like you were guaranteed to get at least the 20 cards in the set. As it is, like it's still buying a pack basically, even though it's a super small set of cards. So that's a little kind of weird, but it's another step in the right direction for Avatar merchandise. We're getting cards again, and even though there's not really a game here, they look quite good, and I'm used to Topps cards. They always do good stuff with the like foil and parallel cards. So what are your thoughts on this surprise announcement here?
Yeah, this is really sort of, I guess, random to me just to see this back. I mean, they have done cards before in the past, and there have, been card games in the past before. But no, it's interesting just to see this random piece of, I guess, official merch just come out, just, for on-demand, purchase. So no, I think it's cool to see for sure.
The art on the cards is a little like, it is stock art. It doesn't seem like too fancy. Like you got a kind of Aang on air scooter, which I think we've seen before. The Katara image I think we've seen before. Sokka, we've definitely seen that one before. The Zuko one I don't immediately like recognize as being like, oh yeah, that's like stock Zuko art. So I don't know. Do you recognize that piece of Zuko art or any of the other ones actually?
That's the only one I don't recognize. All the other ones I recognize.
Okay, so that's interesting in that there might be a couple of new pieces of art here. I'm guessing this is the Team Avatar Zuko, just because it's book 3 Zuko, and I guess the other one will be book 1 Zuko. But yeah, it seems pretty cool, and it's going to have that sort of collectability in the sense that like, if you just get one pack, you pay your $9.99, and you get one of the sort of like, numbered black parallels or white parallels, you're going to be pretty happy. So there's that, and I want to see what like Avatar 4 Elements parallel, like what exactly is that? Is it like just the colors of the 4 elements, and how exactly does that look? Seems pretty cool. But yeah, I'm much more interested in like if they do a proper trading card game. But this is nice to see, I think. But yeah, that's been all of the news. Like I said at the start, we will have a podcast next week to review Suki Alone. We'll cover any news that happens in the meantime as well, but Suki Alone is going to be the focus of the podcast, because I've read it already because I got a review copy, and I can pretty much confirm there's actually a little bit to get into here, unlike some of the other more recent one-shot comics. So keeping it as focused on the comic, I think, is a good thing. So that's why we wanted to get a lot of this news out of the way in this podcast first. But yeah, Suki Alone out on the 27th and the 28th if you're getting it from a comic book store. But not too long to go now, and I'm excited to see some of the reaction to that. But other than that, that's been the podcast. It's been myself and Greg. Thanks for listening, and bye.
Bye-bye.